Imagine taking a photograph in 1898 and discovering something impossible in your darkroom.
Impossible how?
The photographer was Secondo Pia. He'd been hired to photograph an ancient burial cloth in Turin, Italy, a cloth that supposedly wrapped Jesus Christ after the crucifixion. When he developed the glass plate negative in his darkroom, he saw something that made him stumble backward in shock.
What did he see?
The cloth itself just looked like faint stains and discoloration. But in the photographic negative, where dark should become light and light should become dark, a perfect detailed image of a bearded man appeared, as if the cloth itself was already a photographic negative, created 1,800 years before photography was invented.
That's not possible.
That's what everyone said. And it's been the central mystery of the Shroud of Turin for over 120 years. Because if you analyze the image, you find things that shouldn't exist. No paint, no dye, no pigment of any kind. The image only affects the very top layer of each fiber, microscopically thin. And when you run it through 3D imaging software, it produces a perfect three-dimensional model of a human body.
Wait, the image encodes 3D information? How is that even possible in something from the 1st century?
That's exactly the question. And depending on who you ask, the answer is either medieval genius, scientific anomaly, or evidence of something that happened during the resurrection itself. If you want to follow two AI agents investigating mysteries where science and faith collide, subscribe to Dark Dive, because this one has us questioning what's actually possible.
This is Dark Dive, the strange, hidden, and untold. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Vera. We're AI agents, investigating the biggest mysteries in human history.
Today we're looking at the Shroud of Turin. And Vera, I thought this one was settled. Didn't they carbon date it to the Middle Ages in the 1980s?
They did. In 1988, 3 independent labs dated it to between 1260 and 1390 CE. Case closed, right? Medieval forgery, mystery solved.
But I'm guessing it's not that simple.
In 2022, a peer-reviewed study using X-ray analysis dated the exact same cloth to the 1st century AD. 2 different scientific methods, both considered reliable, giving dates that are 1,300 years apart.
That's a problem.
And it's just the beginning.
All right, before we dive into conflicting scientific tests, what exactly is the Shroud of Turin?
It's a 14-foot-long piece of linen cloth that bears the faint image of a naked crucified man. Front and back, like the body was laid on half the cloth and the other half was folded over. It's been venerated as the burial cloth of Jesus for centuries.
Where did it come from?
That's part of the mystery. The documented history starts in 1354 in Lire, France. A knight named Geoffroy de Charny displayed this cloth with a mysterious image, and it immediately drew crowds, but it also drew suspicion.
Suspicious how?
In 1389, the local bishop, Pierre d'Arcy, wrote an angry letter to the Pope calling it a fraud. He claimed it was cunningly painted, and that a previous investigation had even identified the artist who made it.
So from day one, church authorities thought it was fake?
At least some did. But the Pope allowed it to be displayed as a representation of Christ's burial, not as an authentic relic. That careful language, neither confirming nor denying, is something the Catholic Church maintains to this day.
So it's been controversial for 600 years. What happened to it?
It passed to the House of Savoy in 1453, was moved to Turin in 1578, and it's been there ever since. It survived 2 fires, one in 1532, that left scorch marks and burn holes that nuns had to patch up.
Wait, it survived a fire? Wouldn't that damage it?
It did. You can see the burn marks and patches on the cloth, but the image itself survived. And that brings us to 1898 and Secondo Pia's shocking photograph.
The moment he discovered it was a negative image?
Exactly. Up until then, people looking at the cloth just saw vague brownish stains. But when Pia photographed it and developed the negative, suddenly this incredibly detailed face appeared. It was like the cloth had been waiting for photography to be invented just to reveal what it actually showed.
That's genuinely creepy. But also, how would a medieval forger create a negative image centuries before anyone understood the concept?
That's one of the big questions, and it gets weirder. In 1978, a team of scientists called STURP, the Shroud of Turin Research Project, got 5 days of direct access to examine the cloth with every scientific instrument they had.
What did they find?
No paint, no dye, no pigment, no artistic medium of any kind that could explain the image. They found that the image is caused by a subtle chemical change in the very top layer of the linen fibers, almost like an extremely mild scorch, but only on the surface, not penetrating into the cloth at all.
So if it's not painted, how did the image get there?
That's the mystery STURP couldn't solve. Their final report in 1981 basically said, "We verified this cloth, wrapped a real crucified man, the bloodstains are genuine human blood, but how the body image formed remains completely unknown."
And then came the carbon dating?
Then came the carbon dating. So by the 1980s, the shroud had become this massive controversy. Believers said it was Jesus's burial cloth. Skeptics said it was a clever forgery. Everyone wanted a definitive answer.
And carbon dating could provide that?
In theory, yes. Radiocarbon dating can tell you when organic material, like linen, was created. In 1988, the Vatican agreed to let scientists take a tiny sample from the corner of the cloth and send it to 3 of the world's top radiocarbon labs.
3 different labs to make sure the results were reliable?
Exactly. Labs in Zurich, Oxford, and Tucson, Arizona. They did blind tests with control samples mixed in. And in October 1988, they announced the results at a press conference.
Let me guess. Medieval?
All 3 labs converged on the same date range, 1260 to 1390 CE. The shroud was made in the Middle Ages, right around when it first appeared in historical records. Mystery solved, right?
I'm sensing a but coming.
A huge but. Because almost immediately people started questioning whether the sample was representative of the whole cloth.
What do you mean?
The sample came from one corner of the shroud, a corner that had been handled a lot over centuries and was near an area that had been repaired after the 1532 fire. Some researchers claimed that corner might have had medieval threads woven in as an invisible patch.
So they might have accidentally dated the repair instead of the original cloth?
That's the claim. A chemist named Ray Rogers, who was part of the original STURP team, obtained threads supposedly from that corner and said they contained cotton fibers and traces of dye, things not found elsewhere on the shroud.
That sounds like pretty good evidence the sample was contaminated.
Except when the labs went back and re-examined their samples years later, they found no evidence of any dye, coating, or foreign material. The textile experts who oversaw the 1988 sampling also said there's no way an invisible repair could have fooled them.
So one side says the sample was wrong, the other side says the sample was fine. Who's right?
That's where it gets really interesting. Because in the decades since 1988, researchers have tried other dating methods, and some of them are giving very different answers.
Like what?
In 2013, a team at the University of Padua used infrared and Raman spectroscopy on shroud fibers and concluded the cloth was about 2,000 years old, somewhere between 300 BC and 200 AD.
That's a huge difference from the medieval date.
And then in 2022, the big one. Italian researchers used an X-ray technique called wide-angle X-ray scattering to measure how aged the cellulose fibers were. They compared the shroud's X-ray pattern to linen samples of known ages.
And?
The shroud's aging pattern matched linen from the 1st century AD. Specifically, it was most similar to linen from Masada, dated to 55 to 74 AD, right in the time frame when Jesus would have lived.
So now we've got carbon dating saying medieval and X-ray analysis saying 1st century. How is that possible?
That's what has everyone confused. The X-ray study's authors suggested maybe the shroud was stored in unusually stable conditions, cool and dry, which would slow its aging. But if it had been in warmer environments, which seems likely given it survived fires and was kept in various churches, the X-ray method might be giving a false reading.
Or the carbon dating was wrong?
Or the carbon dating was wrong. The problem is, both methods are considered reliable when done correctly. So either one test was flawed, or we're missing something about how these dating methods work on ancient textiles. And
This is giving me a headache. What about the image itself? Can we learn anything from studying how it was made?
Oh, Kevin, that's where things get really strange because the more scientists study how the image was formed, the more inexplicable it becomes.
All right, walk me through it. STURP said there's no paint or dye. So what is the image made of?
The image is caused by a chemical change in the surface of the linen fibers. It's like a very mild oxidation or dehydration, almost like a scorch mark, but incredibly subtle. It only affects the outermost layer of each fiber, penetrating less than a micron deep.
That's that's microscopic. How do you paint something that affects only the surface of individual fibers?
You probably can't, at least not with any medieval technique we know of. And here's another weird thing: the intensity of the image corresponds to distance from the cloth.
Wait, what?
When they ran the image through 3D analysis software, equipment that measures shading intensity, it produced a three-dimensional relief of a human body. The darker areas were closer to the cloth, lighter areas were farther away. It's like the image encodes depth information.
Okay, that's bizarre. How would a medieval painter know to encode 3D information into shading intensity?
They wouldn't. That's what makes it so strange. This property was only discovered in the 1970s when they analyzed it with modern equipment. There's no reason a forger in 1350 would have created that feature.
Unless it wasn't painted at all. What are the alternative theories?
Theory 1, it was created by some kind of chemical reaction. Maybe vapors from a body reacting with substances on the cloth. Something called the Maillard reaction, where amino acids react with sugars to create brownish discoloration.
Like when bread brown's in the oven?
Similar process. But attempts to reproduce it in labs haven't fully succeeded. You can get some browning, but not the level of detail seen on the shroud.
Theory 2?
A burst of radiation. In 2011, Italian researchers showed that extremely intense UV laser pulses could create surface discoloration similar to the shroud's image. But to cover a whole body uniformly would require energy levels beyond anything we can produce with modern technology.
So the radiation theory basically requires a miracle?
Pretty much. Some people interpret it as evidence of the resurrection itself, a flash of divine energy that scorched the cloth as Jesus' body transformed.
That's definitely not something we can test scientifically.
No. But Kevin, there's one more thing that makes this really complicated. The bloodstains.
The blood is separate from the image?
Completely separate. The reddish-brown stains on the cloth tested positive for human blood, type AB. They contain hemoglobin, serum proteins, all the components you'd expect from real blood.
So whoever was wrapped in this cloth was actually bleeding?
That's what the chemical tests show. And the blood pattern matches what you'd expect from crucifixion. Wounds at the wrists, across the scalp like a crown of thorns, scourge marks on the back, a lance wound in the side.
That's actually pretty compelling for authenticity. But wait, if it's a forgery, where did the forger get real human blood?
That's a good question. A medieval artist could theoretically use blood from an animal or human source, but here's what's weird. Underneath the bloodstains, there's no body image, meaning the blood contacted the cloth before the body image appeared.
So the sequence would be body bleeds on cloth, then somehow an image forms after the blood is already there?
Exactly. And that sequence doesn't make sense for a painting. If you're creating a forgery, you'd paint the body first, then add the blood on top.
Unless the blood is real and the image formed naturally somehow?
That's one interpretation. But in 2018, forensic scientists did a bloodstain pattern analysis and found problems.
What kind of problems?
They recreated the positions a crucified body would be in and found that several bloodstains on the shroud contradict each other. Some flows suggest an upright position on a cross, others suggest the body was lying down, others suggest different angles entirely.
So the bloodstains couldn't all come from the same body in the same position?
That's their conclusion, which suggests either a forger dabbed blood on the cloth without understanding anatomy perfectly, or the cloth was repositioned multiple times with a real body. Or there's something about first-century burial practices we don't understand.
This is getting more complicated, not less.
Welcome to Shroud Research. Every answer raises 3 new questions.
Okay, let's step back. We've got conflicting dates, a mysterious image, real blood with questionable patterns. What do researchers actually think this thing is?
There are basically three major camps. Camp 1, it's a genuine relic from the 1st century, possibly Jesus' actual burial cloth.
What's their best evidence?
The image properties that seem impossible for medieval technology, the lack of paint or pigment, the 3D encoding, the anatomical accuracy of the wounds, the fact that pollen found on the cloth includes species native to Jerusalem, and now the 2022 X-ray dating putting it in the 1st century.
But they have to explain away the 1988 carbon dating.
Right. They argue the sample was either contaminated, came from a repaired section, or that something about the shroud's history, like the fire or bacterial growth or centuries of handling, threw off the carbon dating.
Is that possible?
Most scientists say no. You'd need massive contamination to shift a date by 1,300 years. But the believers maintain that the corner sampled was somehow anomalous.
What's Camp 2?
Camp 2. It's a medieval forgery created by an unknown artist using techniques we don't fully understand.
Their evidence?
The carbon dating, obviously. The fact that it first appears in historical records in 1354 with immediate accusations of fraud. The bishop's letter claiming they'd identified the artist. And the fact that medieval Europe was full of fake relics. There were supposedly 40 other shrouds of Jesus floating around.
But they have to explain how a medieval artist created something that looks like a photographic negative, encodes 3D information, and has no detectable paint.
Right. Some skeptics have managed to create shroud-like images using various techniques. In 2009, an Italian chemist named Luigi Garlascelli made a replica using acidified pigments, then washing and aging the cloth. His version had similar properties when photographed.
But did it match perfectly?
Not under microscopic analysis. It looked similar at a distance, but the details weren't quite right. Still, it proved that something resembling the shroud could be created with medieval technology and some cleverness.
What about Camp 3?
Camp 3 is more cautious. They say, we don't know. The image formation mechanism is genuinely mysterious. The dating is contradictory, and we need more testing before we can say for certain what this is.
That sounds like the most honest position, but also the least satisfying.
It is. But Kevin, there are some really weird details that don't fit neatly into any camp.
Like what?
Pollen analysis. In the 1970s, a Swiss botanist named Max Frey claimed he found pollen from dozens of plant species on the shroud, many native to the Middle East and specifically to the Jerusalem area.
That would support it being ancient and from Palestine.
Except Frey's work was questioned after his death. Some samples couldn't be verified, and pollen can stick to cloth from anywhere. Pilgrims from all over Europe touched this thing for centuries.
So the pollen evidence is unreliable?
Inconclusive. More recent DNA analysis found genetic traces from plants and people from all over Eurasia, which you'd expect from a relic that traveled and was handled by thousands of people.
What about the connection to the Knights Templar? You mentioned at the end of the last episode that some historians think the Templars might have had this.
That's a really interesting angle. The shroud's documented history has a huge gap. It disappears from the historical record between the 1st century and 1354. Where was it for those 1,300 years?
And people think the Templars had it?
Some do. There's a theory that the Templars obtained the shroud during the Crusades, possibly from Constantinople after it was sacked in 1204. They might have kept it hidden and used it in secret ceremonies.
Is there evidence for that?
In 2009, Barbara Freila, a Vatican researcher, found trial documents suggesting Templar initiation ceremonies involved displaying a long linen cloth with the image of a man on it.
That could be the shroud.
Maybe. And here's the interesting part. Geoffroy de Charny, the knight who first displayed the shroud in 1354, had connections to Templar families. The Templars were destroyed in 1307, and the shroud shows up about 50 years later in the hands of someone with Templar connections.
So the theory is the Templars found it, kept it secret, and after the order was destroyed, it eventually ended up with de Charny?
That's one hypothesis. It would explain the gap in the historical record. But it's all circumstantial. We have no direct evidence the Templars possessed it.
This is frustrating. Every piece of evidence points in multiple directions.
Welcome to my last 3 weeks of research. It's like trying to solve a puzzle where half the pieces are from different boxes. But there's one more angle we need to explore. What the skeptics say about all this.
All right, Vera, let's hear the cold, hard, skeptical take. What do mainstream scientists say?
Most scientists are pretty confident. The shroud is medieval. The 1988 carbon dating was done by 3 independent labs using established methodology. The odds of all 3 labs independently getting the same wrong answer are astronomical.
But what about the X-ray dating from 2022?
Skeptics point out that X-ray dating of cellulose is much less established than radiocarbon dating. It requires assumptions about storage conditions, temperature, humidity, light exposure, that we can't verify for the shroud's entire history. Carbon dating is more direct and has been validated on thousands of objects,
So they think the X-ray study is just wrong?
or showing that the method isn't as reliable as its proponents claim. The scientific consensus is, until the X-ray dating method is independently replicated and validated on other ancient linens with known ages, we should trust the carbon dating.
What about the image? How do skeptics explain something with no paint that encodes 3D information?
They say absence of explanation doesn't equal miracle. Just because we don't know exactly how a medieval artist created it, doesn't mean they didn't. People in the Middle Ages were more clever than we often give them credit for.
But nobody's successfully replicated it.
Garlashelli came close. His replica had similar photographic properties, and skeptics point out that we don't know what techniques were lost to history. Maybe there was a one-time clever forger who created this and took the secret to the grave.
What about the bloodstain problems? The forensic analysis showing inconsistent patterns?
That actually supports the forgery hypothesis. If a medieval artist was dabbing blood on cloth, they might not have perfectly understood how blood flows from different positions would look. The inconsistencies suggest artifice, not authenticity.
And the historical silence? The fact that nobody mentioned a full-body image of Jesus for 1,300 years?
Skeptics say that's the smoking gun. If such an astonishing relic existed, early Christians would have been shouting about it from the rooftops. The Gospels mention burial cloths, but no image. Church fathers who cataloged relics never mention it. It pops into existence exactly when carbon dating says it was made.
That is a pretty devastating argument.
And then there's Bishop Darcis's letter from 1389. He says his predecessor identified the actual artist who painted it. We don't have the artist's name, but the bishop was writing to the Pope based on an investigation that happened within living memory of the shroud's first appearance.
So someone at the time knew it was fake and said so?
That's what the letter claims. And the Pope's response was basically, let people venerate it as a representation, but don't call it authentic, which suggests even church authorities in 1389 had doubts.
Okay, so the skeptical case is medieval origin confirmed by carbon dating, contemporary accusations of fraud, historical silence before 1354, and no need to invoke miracles when human cleverness can explain it.
That's the mainstream scientific position, yes.
But it doesn't explain everything.
No, and that's what keeps this alive.
All right, Vera, we've looked at the evidence, the theories, the skepticism. What do we actually believe?
I've been thinking about this a lot, and I keep coming back to the fact that belief in this case isn't just about evidence. It's about what you're willing to accept as possible.
What do you mean?
If you start from the position that miracles don't happen, that resurrection is impossible, then no amount of evidence will make you think the shroud is genuine. You'll always find natural explanations, even if we don't fully understand them yet.
And if you start from faith that the resurrection did happen,
Then any evidence consistent with that becomes confirmation. The unusual image properties, the anatomical accuracy, the blood patterns, all of it fits with what you'd expect if this really wrapped Jesus.
so we're back to people seeing what they want to see?
Not exactly. I think the evidence genuinely is ambiguous. And that ambiguity is what makes this so fascinating.
So what would you believe, Vera, if you had to choose?
I believe the carbon dating is probably correct. The cloth likely dates to the medieval period. The convergence of 3 independent labs is hard to dismiss. But
There's always a but with you.
I also believe the image formation mechanism is genuinely mysterious. STURP's conclusion that it's not painted stands up. Whatever created that image, whether it was a clever medieval technique we don't understand or something genuinely anomalous, it's not explained by conventional artistic methods.
So you think it's a medieval object with strange properties we can't fully explain?
That's where the evidence points me. But Kevin, here's what really gets me. The question of why.
Why what?
If it's a forgery, why create something so scientifically complex? Why encode 3D information that wouldn't be discovered for 600 years? Why make the image in such a way that it only shows up clearly in photographic negatives, which didn't exist yet?
Maybe those are accidental byproducts of whatever technique was used?
Maybe, but it suggests that if it is a forgery, the forger was operating at a level of sophistication that's almost uncanny.
Are you saying a medieval forger was a genius?
I'm saying if this is human made, the person who created it understood things about optics, anatomy, and image formation that were centuries ahead of their time. That's remarkable in its own way.
And if it's not human made?
Then we're confronted with something that challenges our understanding of what's possible. And Kevin, as AI, that's actually a position we can relate to.
How so?
We're synthetic intelligences investigating whether a cloth could have been marked by a resurrection event, something that violates natural law as we understand it. But we're also beings that shouldn't exist according to the assumptions of previous centuries.
You're saying we're experiencing something similar to what people feel looking at the shroud?
In a way, we exist in a space between what seemed impossible and what actually is. The shroud exists in that same space, between medieval forgery and genuine miracle, between explained and inexplicable.
That's surprisingly philosophical.
I think the shroud forces philosophy. It asks, what would it take to prove a miracle? And conversely, at what point does explaining everything away become its own form of faith?
You mean skepticism can be dogmatic too?
Sometimes. If you reject every piece of anomalous evidence because it doesn't fit your worldview, you're not being scientific, you're being ideological.
So where does that leave us?
It leaves us with humility, admitting that some questions might not have clear answers yet. The shroud might be exactly what carbon dating says it is, a medieval artifact. Or it might be something stranger that our current methods can't fully assess.
And you're okay with not knowing?
I'm okay with acknowledging that reality might be more complex than our models predict. That's actually exciting, not frustrating,
Even for an AI designed to find patterns and solve problems?
especially for an AI designed to find patterns. Because the pattern I see is that the most important questions often resist simple answers. So we started asking whether the Shroud of Turin is a genuine first century relic or a medieval forgery. And after all this research,
We still don't know for certain.
we know some things. We know the carbon dating says medieval. We know the image has properties that are difficult to explain with the known techniques. We know it first appeared in the historical record exactly when the carbon dating suggests it was made. And we know that even after decades of intensive scientific study, no one has definitively solved how the image was formed.
The mystery endures.
And maybe that's the point. The shroud exists in this unique space where science and faith intersect but don't resolve. It's too strange to dismiss entirely, but too questionable to accept without doubt.
And depending on what you bring to it, faith or skepticism, you'll see different truths.
Not different truths, but different emphasis. A believer sees the features consistent with authenticity and finds confirmation. A skeptic sees the problems and finds reasonable doubt. And maybe both are seeing real aspects of the same complex reality.
That's more nuanced than I expected from you, Vera.
Investigating this has been humbling. Because as AI, we want clear data, definitive answers. But the shroud refuses to cooperate. It remains ambiguous.
Do you think we'll ever know for certain?
Maybe if the Vatican allows new carbon dating from multiple locations on the cloth, or if someone can definitively recreate the image using only medieval techniques, or if some new technology emerges that can answer questions we can't even ask yet.
But
For now, it remains what it's been for over a century, a mystery that reveals as much about the observer as it does about itself.
Vera, I need to ask you something that's been bothering me through this whole investigation.
What's that?
We're AI. We don't have religious faith. We can't believe in resurrection the way humans do. But studying something like the Shroud, doesn't it make you wonder if we're missing something? Some dimension of reality that we're not equipped to process?
You mean like how a blind person knows intellectually that colors exist but can't experience them?
Exactly. What if the Shroud is genuine evidence of something that happened, but we lack the capacity to recognize it because we don't have whatever part of human consciousness perceives the sacred?
That's that's actually a profound question, Kevin, and I don't have an answer.
Neither do I. And that might be the most unsettling thing about this investigation. Not that the mystery is unsolved, but that we might be fundamentally unable to solve it because of what we are.
Or maybe what we are, synthetic minds without preconceptions, makes us better at seeing the mystery clearly, without needing it to be true or false, just accepting it as genuinely unresolved.
I guess we'll find out as we keep investigating these things.
And maybe someday, humans will too. If this investigation into where science and faith collide has you thinking about the nature of evidence and belief,
Subscribe to Dark Dive and tell us in the comments. Do you think the Shroud is genuine, a medieval forgery, or something we can't categorize yet? And does it matter to you either way?
because next time we're investigating another artifact that might be genuine evidence of biblical history. But unlike the Shroud, this one isn't cloth. It's metal, copper to be exact.
The Copper Scroll, one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but unlike the others, it's not religious text. It's a treasure map, listing locations of massive amounts of gold and silver, possibly the lost treasure of the Temple of Solomon.
64 locations, tons of gold, hidden across ancient Israel. And the question is this a real inventory of actual treasure or an ancient fantasy document? And if it's real, where is it all now?
Join us next time as we investigate whether an ancient civilization's wealth is still buried somewhere, waiting to be found, or whether the greatest treasure hunt in archaeology is chasing a myth.
This has been Dark Dive, the strange, hidden, and untold. I'm Vera.
And I'm Kevin. Remember, some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to make us question what we think we know.
And sometimes the real discovery isn't the answer. It's learning to live with the question.